So our theme today is Mind Over Matter, Building Resilient Mental Wellbeing, both the current focus for employers and future innovative strategies. We meet today on Dive-In's 10th anniversary, a decade in which the escalating pace of change has given prominence to wellbeing dialogue, and rightly so. By way of introduction, my name is Josephine Simeone, and I'm honoured to be joining you here today and moderating with our distinguished panellists here. I'm Director People Tenure Consulting, specialising in leadership and team coaching and HR strategic advisory. I was formerly HR Director Pacific with Aon, and that's a keen advocate for Dive-In, along with decades experience of leading the people portfolio across Asia Pacific. It's indeed quite affirming to see the positive evolution of mental wellbeing focus, and as evidenced by the keen interest of everyone joining both here today and virtually. But first, let me introduce our panellists. Susan Fanning. Susan is Head of Wellbeing Solutions APAC at Aon and boasts an impressive 25-year career spanning commercial leadership in healthcare and financial services across Europe, Asia and Africa. As a former Chief Health and Wellbeing Officer at Prudential Thailand, Susan led the commercial success of their health and employee benefits portfolios. Her tenure marked some significant milestones, including Prudential Thailand's pioneering participation in World Diabetes Day and the launch of innovative strategies and tools for mental health and female health support. So thanks for being with us, Susan. Ben Lum. Ben is Global Corporate Partnerships and Sales Manager at Zora Health, Asia's leading platform for fertility, reproductive and family healthcare. Ben is an accredited mental health first aider and is driven by a passion for making mental health support accessible, and works with insurers, HR consultancies and brokers, as well as corporates, to make healthcare more inclusive and reduce stigma across the region. Our third panellist is Bo Yu. Bo is Head of Claims for Asia at Markel International, with 10 years experience of claims management. Prior to joining Markel Singapore, he was a Senior Marine Claims Manager at QBE Insurance and Great American Insurance, where he oversaw the operations of their marine claims teams. And our fourth panellist today is Tristan Thompson. Tristan is Partner Aviation at Kennedy's Legal Solutions, based here in Singapore. He is an English qualified lawyer, that against you, whose clients include top-tier reinsurers and airlines in Asia Pacific and other key jurisdictions. Tristan regularly presents and provides training on aviation and aerospace industry-related topics. Thank you all for being here, and now let's begin. In the first part of our fireside chat, we'll discuss mental wellbeing in the workplace. What are employers providing to their employees? So let's dive in. So Susan, I'll pose the first question to you. How can organisations foster a culture of mental wellbeing and support employees to further build resilience?
Thank you. And it's fantastic to be here today talking about this topic. One thing that's really important for organisations is taking a holistic and proactive approach in building resilience and mental health within their organisations. And actually what we're seeing in APAC is that many organisations are investing heavily in mental health and wellbeing in terms of putting wellbeing teams in place, to help to drive forward the agenda. I think first and foremost is to make sure that you have an open and supportive culture within the organisation. Stigma when it comes to mental health is something that is very prevalent in many countries across APAC. So having that open culture is something that's really important. The second one is on providing access to mental health resources. So whether that is access to counselling services, to EAP, to trainings, and a range of tools and supports that employees can access to be able to build their own awareness, in terms of be better educated, and to understand in terms of what the range of issues for mental health looks like. In terms of what we see is that actually since the pandemic, many organizations built out an extensive range of mental health supports for their employees. But it's always a challenge to know whether what you've got in place is enough, and in terms of how does it benchmark against your competitors. At Aon, one of the things that I'm really proud of and have been in terms of promoting a lot since I joined is we have a workplace strategy index tool, which allows organizations to benchmark their mental health offerings. And again, there is no good or bad score that comes out of it. It's what's right for your organization and for your employees. I think one of the other areas that is very prevalent at the moment is work-life balance. So ensuring that people have flexibility in their work and that you're encouraging employees to take breaks in terms of there's great science that goes behind just taking a pause, taking a 5-minute break. It allows your brain to replay things in a new way and to build memory and to build muscle in that way. Also, what we see in APAC is that actually many employees don't take their vacation time. So it's really important to encourage your employees to take their holidays, to take some downtime, put their phone down, and in terms of just recharge, look after yourself. Alongside that, in terms of building resilience can be helped significantly by offering training and development opportunities. So this is both to individuals, but most importantly to managers and leaders within the business as well. Because what we find is that organizations might have invested heavily in putting assets and resources in place for their employees. But if there isn't a supportive environment in the organization and people don't feel like they have the implicit permission to attend events and to access the resources, it doesn't really happen. So what we see is lots of organizations investing in mental health first aider training, like what Benjamin has done, and investing heavily on their manager population to ensure that they're able to have open and transparent conversations and to recognize what are the signs that perhaps somebody is not okay, and what does that look like. And I think the last one is fostering a sense of community and belonging. We have a client who, as a key part of their employee survey, they're asking the question of, do you have a best friend at work? Because a lot of stats show that 40% of people are lonely in the workplace. They don't have someone. And there's a shocking case from the US recently where somebody passed away in the office, and it was 4 days later that the body was discovered. And that was only when employees reported there was a smell in the office. So how shocking is that? That in terms of you can be surrounded by people in the workplace, but nobody says hello, nobody notices that things are not okay. So that sense of community, that sense of belonging is so important. So when you go back to your office, when you go back to whatever it is that you're doing, say hello to people. In terms of check in on people, and in terms of it's a very small thing, but actually it can make a huge difference to someone.
Thanks, Susan. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, we've evolved, human species, over the years and decades and centuries, but we are pretty tribal at the end of the day, and we do crave and, in fact, thrive when we've got that human interaction. So, Ben, I'll turn over to you. How have you seen mental wellbeing initiatives positively impact health and productivity in organisations, specifically where Zora Health clients are investing and their success measures?
Right. Thank you, Josephine, for that question. And I will definitely agree with Susan. Please interact more with your colleagues, make more friends. There's nothing better than shared trauma. I think with regard to initiatives, it's quite interesting. We've seen many organizations go from, what used to be a bonus, like an added plus, right? Having some form of digital solution to doing something more than that, right? And it's also more than just having the traditional types of health talks, webinars, right? Where it can be a very one-way type of interaction where people treat it kind of like as a lecture. There's not a whole lot of engagement going on. What we are seeing now is, and in fact, there have been a few clients who have approached me to say, hey, you know what, Ben, can we develop a calendar? Okay, and it can even be not just a 1-year calendar, but a 2 to 3 year calendar of activities. And I don't want to have the usual health screenings or health talks and things like that. So employers are getting creative, right? They're also going the extra mile now. They're treating what used to be the extra mile as the foundation. Some examples are involving senior leaders, right? And it's not just senior leaders, it's every level of management in the organization, all the way from your C-suite to your middle managers. And the idea here is to equip every single person, if you're in a leadership role, with the right skills and knowledge to identify signs of distress among their team members, right? And that's how they've been creating this change in the culture from, oh, I'm afraid to speak out to my manager because I'm struggling with something, whether it's diagnosed or not, right? Psychological safety. So that's one of the largest initiatives that I've seen. Obviously, this is not an overnight thing, right? It's not like, okay, we conduct just one training across all our management and that's it. And it may or may not be cheap either, depending on who you engage and what the quality of the training is as well. But what I will say is that one of the most effective ways to change the culture is to really equip people with the right skills and really to reduce this stigma, right? So it's even just, when I show up for the training, am I just here to, put a tick on my checkbox and say, hey, I've attended this training, right? Back to work as usual. It's removing this misconception that this doesn't really apply to me and my team, or this doesn't apply to myself even. Right? And I think the second part of the question is, how do we measure success? That's also a very interesting thing. What I usually advocate for my clients is, in whichever way that you already have been measuring success of your initiatives, right? Whether it's the number of people who turn up, whether it's the feedback survey scores, or whether it's something more objective, like the good work that Susan and her team at Aeon, not paid advertising, by the way, but Aeon has been doing very good work with TELUS Health in co-developing a index that objectively measures all of these things across the organization. And I feel that is really much needed because it's, for the longest time, it's always been, okay, I attend this course and then what happens next? How do I know that I've actually been learning? How do I know that I am applying? Or from an organization leadership perspective, whether as HR or whether as people experience officers, how do I know my managers and my employees are benefiting from this? And very often it's through these digital solutions and health indexes that are able to help quantify that.
Yes, and you certainly can't fake authenticity, and your teams will tell you that as well. Bo, do you mind sharing the initiatives that your organisation, Markel International, has put in place? How does your organisation help claims professionals in managing their mental wellbeing in the course and line of their work?
Thanks, Josephine. I think when I was looking at this question, I kind of split the initiatives into two types. One is the tangible initiatives and one intangible. So for tangible initiatives, I think the importance of mental well-being first started, I think, during the COVID-19 phase, where everybody is in lockdown. And then I think we are not ambitious. We started small. Like many other companies, we started to have these virtual catch-ups, like smaller groups, and then have quizzes, even meals virtually, face-to-face. And then such practices actually carry on even after COVID-19 because we realize the benefit of it. And of course, slowly we are transiting from virtual sessions to face-to-face interactions like games being organized by the social committees. and etc. And then I think at the end of last year, we also introduced an app, mobile app called Intellect, which Ben I think should be very familiar with. And it offers employee an access to a digital platform if you need like a confidential consultation discussion with someone. I think speaking to someone whenever you have this kind of issue is important. It's not about holding it to yourself and think you are alone and nobody understands you. It's about speaking about it, talk about it, and then understand it. And coming from the intangible side, I think it's like what Suzanne has mentioned. It's about corporate culture. Yeah, so for Markel, we are a people-first organization. And what does it mean by people first is that we try to build a diverse and inclusive culture whereby all our employees can be themselves authentically. You don't need to wear a mask just because you may have different opinions or different perspective. And this is especially important for the Asia Pac offices because we are growing that fast. And I still remember when I joined Markel in 2020, the Markel community in Asia is only about 35 people. And 4 years later now, we are already over 100, coming from different locations, different backgrounds, having different roles or at different phases of our lives. Definitely, we will be subjected to the different opinions and voices. So it's important for everyone to understand that different voices and perspective can be valued and appreciated, rather than trying to draw a line and not to communicate. And then when it comes to claims, that's the second part. I think one of the culture that we build within the claims team is that we believe in people empowerment. And by what does it mean by people empowerment is that whenever a claims handler is being given authority, you're trusted to make decisions within that authority. And I think trust is very important. And it also builds confidence within you over time. And when you have that confidence, you will not spend too much time like self-guessing or over-analyzing your decisions. And I'm sure if any one of us have gone through that phase, that stage could be very mentally exhausting as well. And talking about collaborative culture, I think I have the first-hand experience myself last year. As a claims professional, whenever there's a claims dispute, complaint usually follows with it if the customer is unsatisfied about it. And insurers actually insurers are very serious about complaints, and they have all the dedicated procedure that is along with it. And being the subject matter of the complaint, of course, I'm stressed, even though I think I didn't do anything wrong, but you still think, have I done anything wrong? Have I missed this? Have I missed that? So all these thoughts start to appear on your mind. And what pieces my mind is that when my claims director reviewed the file, and the first thing he told me is that, look, Bo, for Markel, when we are starting an investigation, it's not about finding faults on anyone, and it's not about finding a scapegoat. It's more about finding out what's the facts and how do we improve from this, rather than trying to find somebody to put him under the bridge. Yeah. So after hearing that, I feel more comfortable. And one of the things I think is important for claims for management or superiors is that being open and transparent can help the people to be less evasive and defensive during an investigation. So you don't spend too much time trying to find out what exactly went on, because when people become defensive and evasive, they start to twist and turn, start to protect themselves, and then you don't get to the bottom of it. And I think when after all this investigation, it turns out to be okay. When I share the story with my team and somebody else, they feel that you are supported within the company whenever you face a difficult time. And I think that's important, because when you know your company is behind you in the event of a difficult time, you have the courage to deal with things. So the next time when you're dealing with a difficult conversation, you don't need to worry about what is my company going to do about me. Are they going to throw me under the bus, or am I going to lose my job or anything like that? So I think there are definitely more tangible initiatives around the market nowadays. It's also important for corporate to start looking into their culture, because if we can address stress or mental health issues at the root before it surfaces, prevention is better than cure.
Thank you. That's very well said and summarised there, Bo. So I'll hand over to our fourth panellist, so Tristan. We all appreciate the unique challenges the aviation sector has faced in recent years, and we've witnessed their resiliency. What do you believe rather are the biggest challenges employees face when implementing mental wellbeing programs? How can they be overcome? And some key learnings from aviation that will be applicable to all organisations.
Yeah, well, thank you, Josephine. It's a really good question. But firstly, thank you so much to everyone for the opportunity to be here. It is such it's such an important topic. And I think just that there's so many people in the room and online just reinforces how important it is and that we've got engagement already. But I think there's a lot we can take from the aviation industry, whether it be COVID. So much resilience was demonstrated during the COVID-19 pandemic, particularly in terms of support and empathy. What was important for an airline during that time, it was to support the employees. They did that by furlough arrangements. They realized fundamentally they had to act at the time, but they also had to take a bit of a helicopter view. There's going to be a life after COVID. What are we going to need after COVID? We're going to need people. We've got to invest in those people. So we're going to have to furlough them and support them. And I think that is fundamental to where we are here, because they absolutely realized, to Bo's point, that prevention is the key. The effects that absence as a result of well-being issues has on a business is enormous. The net result on the balance sheet is crucial. So how do we tackle that? We've got to support and empathize early and prevent. I think that's a lot we can take away from the airline. But what are the challenges, I think, for organizations, certainly from a law firm? For me, it's a little bit to do with generational alignment. I think, at my ripe old age of 42, I'm acutely aware of the fact that people younger than me, they may have a different view on mental well-being than perhaps that I was brought up with, certainly when I was training to be a lawyer. But I really believe you've got to lead from the front. You absolutely have to lead from the front. But in order to do that, I have to have good knowledge of what the firm is offering. I think we're very lucky that everyone in this room, we probably have foundations in place within our organizations that can support our employees. Do they have the knowledge? As a leader, it's incumbent upon me to know what they are, speak to the great people in HR that we have at Kennedy's and say, right, so what do we have at our disposal here? How can I take that forward to these employees? But also, notably, front up to it, be honest with your employees. I'm not going to lie, I work quite long hours. I struggle sometimes mentally. It's a lot, but I've got to be honest with my team that happens to me. And hopefully if I can be honest with them, they can respond positively to me. So I think that is really important in terms of overcoming the challenges that we face. And then beyond that, it's keeping regular contact with our team members. Really is being engaged with them and being real. I think if you're not real with the employees, if you're just using buzzwords, I think that they will look at that straight away. You've got to be real and honest and consistent. So I think that's how we can overcome the challenges that we face.
Thank you. There's some real key themes there. So, but I guess I would sum it up as connecting to our humanity. It always goes back to that. And actually, it's really encouraging to see the value that has. Those simple acts, being quite transparent about it with others, connecting and communicating, and as a baseline, really, rather than an optional extra. So thank you for sharing that. Some really good insights for us to consider, and it's really heartening also to see spotlight on what organisations and practices are out there as well. So thank you. Okay, so now let's turn our attention to the future outlook and opportunities that we can then take back collectively to further evolve and build resilient wellbeing. Specifically, some innovations and emerging strategies for the next decade. So let's explore what the future holds, shall we? So again, I'll refer to you, Susan. given your extensive in-house and consulting experience, can you share your vision for how mental wellbeing initiatives will evolve over the next decade, and how can we further foster increased resiliency?
Thank you. An extensive experience doesn't necessarily mean I'm old, right?
Not at all.
Thank you. I think as we look to the future, a lot of the focus that we talk about today in terms of building a focus around mental health and building mental health strategies, it will just be building the culture of your organization. It won't be a separate topic. So that it will be integrated, it will be personalized, and it will be proactive. I think also looking 10 years ahead in terms of we're seeing a lot of change that's happening both within organizations, but also changes that governments are making as well. And that will drive a significant change in what organizations are offering, but also what are the expectations that employees have from employers? What will their expectations be in 10 years' time will be dramatically different to what we see today. In terms of, Tristan referred to younger people coming into the workforce, they are coming in equipped with language that in terms of I didn't have growing up, in terms of, and with the comfort and confidence of speaking about their mental health and speaking about where it is that they are. So it's also how, as an organization, you grow and you evolve with that in terms of how do you ensure that everyone in your organization can have that same language, can enter into a conversation in the same way, because otherwise it becomes really difficult and awkward. If you're sitting there as a leader, as a manager, in terms of hearing things from people in your organization that actually you can't even see and recognize in yourself. And I think the focus on leadership and in terms of growing and evolving the culture is a significant part of what we'll see in the future. Going alongside that, I think technology plays a huge role within there in terms of helping individuals to be able to see how they're doing. In terms of I have a wearable ring, and in terms of I know how I've slept, but also I check each morning as to what was my resting heart rate, in terms of what's my heart rate variability, in terms of how am I equipped to face into the day. So as organizations and as individuals, we'll be using data in new ways, which will help to address a lot of the stigma that exists at the moment as well. Because in a number of the surveys that we've run, what we find is that many individuals struggle to admit to themselves that they have a problem, let alone being able to even say to family and friends that they have an issue. And the fear on speaking in the workplace and sharing that you have an issue and what does that mean for your career? These things are real. And it's interesting because we've also surveyed some, in terms of HR professionals, around actually if an employee comes and shares what's happening with their mental health with them, how would they react? And do they have a concern around what that will mean for the person's career? And sadly, in some organizations at the moment, they would see that it does. But in 10 years' time, hopefully this is not an issue that we're still facing. Both because society at large is more open around the conversations, and Singapore is a great ambassador of this. The government has is passing new regulations, legislation, and in terms of providing a huge amount of support into the community that's focused both at young people and in terms of the older generations as well. So recognizing that everybody needs to be able to enter into the same conversation. From an organizational perspective, I think the metrics that people will look at will be significantly different. It's the conversations around I have EAP, but nobody's really using it will be irrelevant in terms of, and actually, just because no one is using your EAP doesn't mean that you don't have a mental health issue. In terms of, we've done a huge amount of work in looking at our health claims and in terms of being able to see which ones of those have a primary driver of mental health within it. And we can see instances where 25% of inpatient claims and 12% of outpatient claims can have mental health as a primary driver of it. So again, in terms of look at the data that you have, look at it in a different way to be able to understand what's the current situation that you have. In the future, the focus will be less on in terms of your health claims and much more on in terms of the sense of belonging in your organization and productivity. Because what we see is that in terms of people who are well, who are engaged and who feel supported are more likely to stay with you and are more likely to actually be high performers. And to, in terms of that sense of belonging, is incredibly important. We see it coming through in all of the different metrics that organizations are looking at. There's a lot of organizations at the moment that are they're even changing the language because counseling can have a certain amount of stigma that goes alongside it, but coaching doesn't. And in terms of when we look at the future, it will be much more about actually how am I being supported as an individual? And in terms of, so what's my performance and what do I need to perform well? In both how the organization is constructed. So 10 years time, AI will be just a part of daily work. It may still drive a sense of job insecurity, but in a different way to what it does today. So the conversations around in terms of skilling and reskilling will have changed. And I think a key part of that will be the organizational sense of culture on education, on coaching, and in terms of investing in yourself and investing in managers to actually build the organization that you want in the future.
Well, clearly I'm a strong advocate of coaching. And I think there's going to be a big rush on everyone buying rings if you don't already have one, and Apple Watches and sleeping with it during the night. So thanks, Susan. And talking about technology, Bo, what technological advancements do you foresee playing a significant role in the future of mental wellbeing, both within claims and organisationally?
Well, I was reading a recent newspaper article from Straits Times, and they were doing a survey with working adults, and one of the findings is that out of those working adults, one of the major factor attributable to burnt out, they are referring to workloads. So people are always facing stress because the workloads cannot be coped. So when you talk about workloads, I think technology certainly seems to be the key to address this. So for example, for us, we are always having this open feedback loop within the organization to determine ways of how to improve work processes and how to make work more efficiently. And so for us on the claim side, we are actually also investing heavily to come up with a new claim system which adopts AI. Now, when people talk about AI, that may in itself generate stress because people have concerns about AI is going to replace us in the future. So when you have a new claim system that replaces human, where is the claims adjuster going to be sit, or are we just sitting down and supporting the AI instead of them supporting us? So I think for us, I think the message is clear. At its current phase, I think AI plays a supportive role rather than the decision-making role, and we need to embrace AI with an open mind, because I think humans face similar things during the industrial revolutions when machines are being introduced, and back then I think people are stressed about, oh, what are we going to do next? But I think when we start to embrace and explore the opportunities that we can co-work with AI, I think you might enter into I call it a virtual cycle of receiving more job satisfaction doing the work that you like to do and reducing the frustration of obstacles to stop you from getting your job satisfaction. That includes manual processes, filings, papers, and things like that. And as a claims manager, I'm certainly looking forward to the new tool that can help me assess the workloads of my team and help me to plan resources way early before the stress or the burnout sets in. I think that's important because currently, I think in the market, when it comes to resource planning and everything, whilst we try to be proactive, we don't have the amount of data to support it. And if you have a dynamic tool which introduces more variables into the equation rather than just numbers, I guess it could be the complexity of the matter, the mental state or well-being, the trend of your claims handler in the past. Then you can assign work more accurately rather than just thinking he or she is fine. So I think when you address this dynamically and from the right of the beginning, so it kind of reduces the risk of your team facing stress when they are dealing with amount of workload that is just too overwhelming. Yeah. Thank you.
I think there's a good intersection to be quite purposeful and intentional in terms of how we design work, how do we design roles and tasks. And given that we are living in the digital 5.0 age, you would like to think that humanity has learnt from prior revolutions and various work ages that we can be really thoughtful around how we can deploy technology in an ethical way and, frankly, to make life more interesting and bring joy. So really pleased to hear that that's the focus with you and your team there. Thank you. So Ben, actually Tristan, how do you envisage the role of leadership in harnessing wellbeing strategies for the future? And we've touched on that, but I'm really curious on your perspective and more particularly what needs to be dialed up.
Okay, well, I actually think that the key word in that question is strategy, because we have to be absolutely clear that there's a distinction between strategy and tactic. A mental tactic might be, it's not my line, I heard it actually the other day, so I must be honest. But a tactic is like putting a ping pong table in the office. That's not really a strategy. For the record, we don't have a ping pong table, but I'd quite like one. But that isn't a strategy, but we've got to put a foundation in place. What is the ultimate strategy here? Where is the ultimate well-being goal? How are we going to get there? I think we all as individuals and organizations, we have to be benchmarked against that strategy. We really do. But how do we do that? Is it in a law firm? A lot of our targets are driven by chargeable hours. So, chargeable hours can be quite high, particularly if you're in a US law firm. Fortunately, I'm not, but they can be quite high. So that's hard, isn't it? When you're saying, here are your chargeable hours, go and do 1,500, 2,000 chargeable hours a day. Oh, but you've got to hit your well-being target. There's a conflict there. And also, I think as lawyers, what we have to be mindful of is we need total buy-in in global commerce. A lot of what we do and the hours that we do are driven by client demands. So it's very, very hard for me to say to a team, no, go and relax, you need time now, when we have work that needs to be done, particularly by reference to court deadlines. So that can be really difficult. But I think there has to be a bit of a global shift in how we're all treating each other and being kind to each other. So I think that's key. What is the strategy and what needs to be dialed up? What the strategy, clear understanding, a clear path needs to be there. What else? I think, I alluded to it earlier, but it's wholly incumbent upon me as a leader to take responsibility for my team. It's not, there's no distinction now between, okay, gosh, that's mental well-being, that's HR, that's not me. No, that's me. The buck stops with me. I have to have these regular check-ins that I talk to. I have to invest in the teams, feel like what their drivers are, what their triggers are, when they're feeling nervous, when they're feeling anxious. And I think we have to be clear that there are boundaries that we all need to be respectful of. For instance, my team, I've got an amazing team. They work really, really hard. And we regrettably, I am almost ashamed to say it, because we are very busy, that midweek we say to them, that's the sacrifice, that's midweek. If that's the case, you've got to have a non-negotiable. Is your non-negotiable, I'm not going to work this weekend. It has to be a non-negotiable. There's a non-negotiable, I'm not working every Tuesday, I finish at 6 o'clock and I'm going to have family time. So I think that really needs to be dialed up in terms of, what we as leaders take on board, and we take full responsibility for our action.
I think boundary setting is certainly something that, as you just alluded to there, Tristan, absolutely needs to be dialed up, and particularly in the war that continues between life and work. Personally, I like to call it integration, but with really clear boundaries, and making peace that it's elusive to think you can have it all the time, but certainly being clear about the non-negotiables is certainly, I think, a good takeaway for all of us here to take away. So thanks for reiterating that. So the last question I'd like to pose to Ben. So Ben, what innovative strategies or programs should organisations consider now to future-proof their mental wellbeing success?
Right. I think when we think of future-proofing, there has to be an understanding of preventative approach, right? The whole idea of future-proofing is to prevent a situation from happening, and so we need to stop thinking that, oh, there's an incident that happens at my workplace as a HR leader or as a senior leader, then I start to address mental health in my organization. It used to be the case where something happens at work, someone does something in the workplace, sometimes even in the office in front of other co-workers, in some of our clients, and they'll be scrambling, right? Hey, can I have this urgent hotline that I can dial to get some of my other colleagues that kind of support? Or do you have a psychologist or counselor that you can activate within the hour sometimes to come and address this at my workplace? And it has really shifted over the last 2 to 3 years to something that's a lot more, as Susan said, on the proactive side of things. So I know that, and I know that if I work as a HR leader, I work with my consultant to do the benchmarking, right? What is the rest of my industry doing, right? And actually, this is industry agnostic. Across most, if not all industries, leaders are taking a much more holistic approach. So now it's not just preventative, it's also holistic, right? They're introducing mental health solutions, whether it's some platform or whether it's changing the organizational culture. And they're looking at it from a different perspective, a more helicopter or bird's eye view, right? Where other pillars of well-being also affect mental well-being and vice versa, right? I'll give an example. In fact, SCORE this year just published a study. I believe it was middle to late this year, actually. So it's quite recent. They surveyed 13,000 individuals across 22 key markets. And they found that there was a 17% reduction in psychiatry claims and a 9% reduction in therapy claims as well. And I had no idea, I could not have guessed what the solution was. These people who were surveyed simply did more physical exercise. It could be taking a regular walk. It could be a regular jog, even. And so that really went huge lengths to show that, these things are actually intertwined. These things are intertwined. And by incentivizing simple actions, just like these, you can actually make a huge impact. And that impact was a savings of £510,000 in terms of claims. So they were saving organizations a lot of money, saving insurers a lot of money as well. And this is really consistent with a lot of the activities that we see governments doing now. I know for a fact that in Singapore, I don't think there's been a parliamentary sitting where mental health has not been mentioned, right? They are starting at every seniority of society. There's the Mindline Initiative for Youth that the Ministry of Health Transformation, the MOHT, is doing, right? And the government is also encouraging employers to adopt solutions, whatever they may look like, right? Start small, start big, but just start somewhere, right? They're also encouraging insurers to do something. It's not an overnight thing, of course, but they're encouraging insurers to take a second look at, how can we reduce the exclusions that are out there, right? And it's not just for the sake of pandering to, get the votes and things that I like to think it that way. But it's really about making tangible and long-lasting change in society, targeting youths to change the next generation of the workforce, but also addressing the current generation of working professionals, right? And these are the people who would be purchasing insurance. These are the people who would be affected most by group policies, individual policies. And really just having this open-mindedness to explore pilots. I know for a fact that there are some local insurers who have started pilots with some providers to make their group policies just a little bit more inclusive, if anything, right? So different levels of approach, different stakeholders. All I would say is if we observe what society, the direction that society is taking, it's going to be a group effort. It's not going to be, oh, you know, this is a private matter, so as an individual, go deal with it yourself. Neither is it going to be the government saying, oh, this is our responsibility to take it on. It's going to be at every level. Every stakeholder needs to play their part. And, you know, I think just one final point here, addressing the workplace. We spend most of our waking hours at workplaces. Even if it's at home, we are still working, right? So I really feel, and I feel very encouraged actually, that more and more employers are not seeing this as a burden that they have to take on themselves, but as an important responsibility, right? That, you know, by doing something about this at my workplace, in my workforce, I'm actually improving the lives of my employees, and I can actually measure that. Right? So it's not just airy-fairy things like I roll out some solution and then, you know, I can't measure that change. It's about having a measurable index. It's about measuring claims, right? Just one example, there was I know of one of the largest electronics manufacturing companies, fairly traditional in nature, in fact, and they had a 5-figure workforce in just 2 markets that a digital solution was rolled out. And they saw a reduction in 80% of their psychiatry claims, right? Their satisfaction scores just went off the charts. And yeah, so really it's having that open-mindedness, whether you're HR, whether you're an insurer, whether as an individual as well, whether you want to open up about your struggles with family or your manager as well. Yeah.
Thank you. That's a wealth of information we've heard from thus far, and clearly everybody is interested. So thank you for your insights on that. So audience members, both in the room and virtually, I'm now going to hand over to you. So here's an opportunity to pose any questions or even share some of your perspectives that you'd welcome commentary from anyone in the panel. You'll see there on the screen, there's a Slido code that you could, or clearly we can walk around with mics in the room and you can speak to those.
Thank you. Thanks very much for sharing all those insights. It's really fascinating and really interesting to hear. I had a question just in terms of how, I guess, do you identify as sort of, you know, businesses where there might be disconnect between like the strategic position of trying to, you know, manage a high performing team with billable hours and getting the most out of employees and having strong strategies to support mental well-being. How do you perhaps identify where there might be problems in a business where maybe the strategic position, maybe people don't have that sort of implicit safety to sort of have a break and go and get some exercise and move around? Yeah, how do you sort of identify where there might be challenges and have a targeted approach to that? I'm happy to have a go at that first. So what we do with clients is actually we collect a lot of data and information that they have. And we also look to understand what is the voice of what's happening and going on. Because it's one thing in terms of you look at claims and you're like, oh, you've got employees with office syndrome, in terms of you've got employees with cancer, in terms of a range of other conditions. and to be able to suggest interventions that you can put in place that can address those. Because a lot of office syndrome actually has mental health at the back of it. But understanding what is somebody's entry point into actually getting involved in using the interventions that you've and the supports that you've got put in place can be quite different. So ensuring that you're getting the voice of the employee is incredibly important. And it's a way of checking whether the supports and the assets that you've got in place are inclusive. Because last week I was spending time with a client and they have factory workers and they have office workers. And a lot of interventions that are put in place and supports that are put in place and education systems, they work really well in an office environment. If you're running a factory and you've got people that are coming in and they're doing shift work and they get in and they get out in terms of because it's a health and safety of people are hanging around, what do you do in terms of how do you approach that? So it is really understanding your people and building something that is inclusive for everyone, addresses all needs. And it's actually the challenge that many organizations have. And this is where by looking at in terms of all of the data that you've got, so your health claims data, what are employees saying, but also other metrics that you've got. So looking at your absence data, looking at your performance data, and in terms of seeing whether there are, in terms of any trends or insights that are there that might highlight that there's an issue that's going on. It's also being really open around some of the changes that are happening in your organization. We had a client in Singapore reach out recently, and they were going to go through redundancies, and they wanted to put an EAP program in place, employee assistance program, to support their employees so that they would have it in place. And again, that was put in place within 24 hours so that they, in terms of had all of the right supports in place for their employees to be able to talk about what was happening and going on. Because for many people, there's a couple of things where your mind freezes when you hear it. Cancer is one, redundancy is another, and there's a whole range of others. So actually having that first conversation with someone before you go home to your family really helps quite a lot because then you've said it out loud. And the challenge with a lot of things that are mental health related is that it's the voices in your head. And in terms of, so how are you understanding those? How are you in terms of understanding what that is, which comes through in many different ways.
Thank you, and thanks for posing the first question. I'm just conscious of the time, so I might just pick two that came through virtually. First one, and I'll invite anyone in the panel to talk to, is with Asian culture specifically in mind, what tips does the panel have to normalise talking about mental health and viewing this as a strength and not a weakness?
Maybe I can have a stab at that. Yeah, Asian culture. I think, yes. Traditionally, the Asian mindset has always been, if I struggle with a problem, I deal with it personally, right? I don't most of us here will probably just keep it in, right? And that is a huge struggle, right? Now, normalize talking about mental health. I think particularly in Singapore, being a very international country, right? We have a lot of external influences and things like that. And I think a lot of the movement in other markets has somewhat influenced the culture here in Singapore. And I would like to think for the better, right? So when we talk about normalizing mental health conversations, I think just 5-7 years ago, this was not even a thing, right? No one would come up to you and say, hey, I struggle with this. Now with social media and a whole regional movement, right? People are not afraid to shout on the mountaintops, like, hey, I struggle with this and it's okay. Of course, we still have a lot of ways to go. And I think the fact that multiple stakeholders are doing their part now, I don't think it's something that needs awareness anymore. I think, and I just want to borrow this line from someone from a post I read on LinkedIn recently. It's It's not about the conversations that are difficult to have. It's about the conversations that we don't want to have as leaders in our organizations or as leaders in society, right? It's about saying, you know what, my organizational culture struggles with this, with people bottling things up and lots of misunderstandings because people voice out their frustrations or their mental health struggles, and they just get shut down. Things are just being swept under the rug. So I think it really can begin at leadership levels, exemplifying what it means. And sometimes it's really having, as senior leaders, having open and honest conversations with our team members, right? Having hard stops when it comes to long work hours, or having sharing your own struggles as leaders with team members. I can assure the leaders in the room here and those tuning in online as well that they will not see you as weak or incapable. In fact, they see you as down to earth and being just like the rest of everyone else as well, that you're actually human.
Thank you. And unfortunately, we're out of time, so we won't be able to go through the rest of the questions. But perhaps in closing, I'd invite each of the panellists to share, I guess, their top 2 key messages that we could walk away with and start to continue to ponder and the dialogue on mental wellbeing back in our workplace. So, Tristan, I'm going to start with you.
Thanks. Well, I think my top message is to get everyone's buy-in. Get everyone's buy-in as an organization. In order to do that, I think you've got to be authentic. You've got to be upfront, tell everyone exactly how you're feeling. Obviously, don't overshare, and in doing so scare. But yeah, be authentic to get the buy-in for what it is you're actually looking to achieve. Because what you are looking to achieve through good well-being culture, it's just a better environment. You get that better environment, you've got a more productive business. So everyone's a winner.
I guess for me, I think I'm just trying to summarize the recent thoughts going through my mind after my jet lag, because the next day when I woke up, I don't know whether it's jet lag or I'm having some mental health issues. But I think what I could summarize is that throughout our life journey, we have different roles to play, and we have more roles that comes along. I can see the audience down there. We may be someone's father, mother. We may be someone's sons or daughters. We may be a colleague, a team leader, or a friend. And often the time, whilst we are trying to balance the various roles that have come across our life, we tend to ignore the very individual that is within ourselves. That very individual that also has needs, that also has voices to be heard. And so don't ignore it. Don't suppress the occasional outcries. Be yourself, love yourself. Only when you love yourself enough, you don't have the positive energy to do others. And it's perfectly fine to tell someone that you are not okay. Yeah, it's okay to be not okay. Thank you.
Ben.
I would say be the change that you want to see. Reason being, it's whether as all the way up from being a C-suite leader to just an associate, right, in an organization, whether you are looking to roll out some new solution that you've never tried before, right, or even just a simple initiative that hasn't been tried in the organization before as a leader. And as an individual in the organization, if you're seeing something new, it's a new initiative, it's a new some new program being rolled out, right? Don't just write it off as this is just another regular thing that my company is doing. Be that change as well. Be part of that change. It has to be a collective effort, right? I think I speak to a lot of leaders as well, and number one thing that they're hesitant to do is roll out something new because they're scared of what if this isn't accepted by my company, and end up nothing gets done, right? So I would say be open and be that change.
And Susan, your key message for the audience here today.
I think two things is one, be inclusive. Whatever you're putting in place, make sure that it's going to work for everyone in your organization. And the second one is if you're a leader in an organization, take a look at the targets and KPIs that you're setting and that you're tracking in your business. Because if they're all financial metrics, you're not going to see change. In terms of put a balanced scorecard in place, ensure that you're prioritizing the importance of supporting your people.
Thank you. Thank you. And now I just want to have a special thanks to our hosts today, which made it possible for us to be here, Markel, RGA, Kennedy Legal Solutions and Elliott Partnerships. And with that, please join me in applause in thanking our panel for a really enjoyable chat.